Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking. As you no doubt may be aware, we are having a small problem with our engines.
The pilot told a white lie. The Airbus A330 was mid-flight. One engine was down. The other engine stuck on full throttle. Little do the 309 passengers aboard know, in a few minutes they could be crashing into the South China Sea. The only thing between life and death is what the two pilots in the cockpit do next. With the clock ticking, will they be able to make it back to Hong Kong International Airport in time before something catastrophic happens? This is the story of Cathay Pacific Flight 780, April 13th, 2010, Surabaya, Indonesia. Cathay Pacific Flight 780 is scheduled for a 5-hour flight to Hong Kong. While boarding the plane, the 309 passengers and 13 crew didn't know that they were not in for an uneventful flight. The pilots were adequately trained, the weather forecast was clear, the plane was adequately fueled. Everything was set up for a perfectly normal flight, but the passengers and crew were already in grave danger. This was about to be a scenario that the pilots had never trained for. The plane lifted off at 8:24 a.m. Immediately during liftoff, the warning signs began. Engine number 2, engine pressure ratio low. The engine's thrust was decreasing. Takeoff complete, and they're at 39,000 feet. Another warning. Engine number 2, slow response. After a few radio calls, the crew decided to continue the flight. The engine number 2 warnings return. They try de-icing the engine, but it does nothing. A few more radio calls and they're advised to continue the flight. A few hours went by uneventful. The readings were unusual, but not dangerous. Then at 1:20 p.m., they began their descent, and that's when things started to go wrong. The pilot hears a pop and smells that something is burning. The warnings appear. Engine 1 control system fault. Engine 2 stall.
Stalled.
They followed procedure and throttled down Engine 2. Warning, Engine 1 slow response. But they had to compensate for Engine 2, so they throttled up Engine 1. But Engine 1 wasn't responding. Its thrust went down. They were 100 miles away from Hong Kong. Both engine thrusts were too low. At this rate, they'll never make it to Hong Kong, and they'll eventually crash into the sea. The pilots declare a pan to air traffic control, one step below declaring an emergency. They rearrange their flight plan to land ASAP. Warning, Engine 1 stalled.
Stalled.
First officer declared Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. The plane had now become a glider. If they were going to make it, they needed engine power. After fiddling with the thrust, the pilot realized that Engine 1 was responding a little bit, but as they were making their approach, they were going too fast, so the captain pulled back on the throttle, but it wasn't responding. He brought the thrust all the way back, but the engine was still running at the high setting. Now one engine was dead and the other was operating at 74%. With no time left, they'd have to attempt a landing, at a speed of which no aircraft this big has ever attempted.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking. As you no doubt may be aware, we're having a small problem with our engines. Please fasten your seatbelts.
They deploy the speed brakes, and he started to zigzag the aircraft to try to get it to slow down. It didn't work. Warning, overspeed. They deployed the flaps all the way. It could damage the plane at this speed, but to hell with that. They needed to slow down. Terrain, pull up. Warning sounds and alarms were ringing all over the cockpit. At 1:45 p.m., the plane slammed down into the runway at twice the normal landing speed. It bounced and hit the ground again, and the left engine scraped on the runway. Spoilers automatically deployed, and the pilot activated thrust reversers. He slammed on the brakes, and they glowed white hot, hitting insane temperatures. The airplane skid on the runway, and they were running out of room. But finally, the aircraft came to a halt just 309 meters from the runway's end. The pilots had saved everybody's lives. With the brakes way too hot, the pilots ordered an evacuation. The pilots are hailed as heroes for their efforts, and received the Polaris Award by the International Federation of Airline Pilots Association, the highest decoration for a civil aviator. Investigations after the flight found that the fuel tanks at Surabaya had recently been overhauled improperly, which contaminated the fuel. The fuel had clogged portions of the engines. The aircraft mechanic responsible for fueling the aircraft ignored signs of excessive vibration while fueling, which was a telltale that there had been contamination in the fuel. To prevent this from happening again, the fueling procedures at Juranda Airport had been updated. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to get more content like it.